Picture this: a 13-year-old boy with no shoes, no money, and no family walks alone through the French countryside. He sleeps in forests, begs for scraps of food, and can't even read his own name. Fast forward 150 years, and that boy's company is worth $39 billion. The man who now controls his empire, Bernard Arnault, is the second wealthiest person on Earth with a net worth of $180 billion. But this isn't just another rags to riches story. This is the tale of Louis Vuitton, a saga filled with royal endorsements, devastating wars, Nazi collaboration, hostile takeovers, and dark secrets that the company tried desperately to hide. This is how a homeless teenager with nothing to his name built the world's most powerful luxury empire, and why his own family would eventually lose control of everything he created. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Had Nothing. Louis Vuitton was born in 1821 in a forgotten corner of France called Angers, a village so remote that most maps didn't bother to include it. This wasn't the romantic French countryside you see in movies. There was no electricity, no running water, no hope of escaping the grinding poverty that suffocated every family for miles around. Louis's father, Xavier, scraped together a living as a miller and farmer, while his mother, Corinne, stitched hats by candlelight, desperately trying to bring in a few extra coins. The nearest school was 6 miles away through muddy roads and harsh weather, but education was a luxury the Vuitton family simply couldn't afford. While other children his age might have been learning to read, Louis was working from dawn to dusk in the fields, his small hands blistered and bleeding as he helped grow just enough food to keep his family from starving. Then tragedy struck in the cruelest way possible. When Louis was just 10 years old, his mother died, leaving him emotionally shattered and more vulnerable than ever. His father, overwhelmed with grief and the burden of raising a child alone, quickly remarried. But Louis's new stepmother was a nightmare. She was controlling, manipulative, and seemed to take pleasure in making his life miserable. Every day became a battle of wills. Every conversation turned into a screaming match. The woman who should have provided comfort and guidance instead made his existence unbearable. For 3 years, Louis endured this toxic environment, but on one cold night when he was 13 years old, he'd had enough. While his family slept, he quietly gathered his few possessions, wrapped himself in a thin cloak, and slipped out into the darkness. He was running away to Paris, determined to build a new life or die trying. There was just one massive problem with this plan. Paris was 225 miles away, and Louis had no money, no food, and no real understanding of what lay ahead. For the next 3 years, he would walk along dirt roads and sleep wherever he could find shelter. Most nights, that meant curling up in forests with nothing but his cloak for warmth, his stomach empty and his body aching from exhaustion. Whenever he stumbled into a village, he would beg for work, doing any job people would give him in exchange for a piece of bread or a few coins. He learned to work with metal from blacksmiths, picked up stone-cutting techniques from masons, discovered how to handle fabric from tailors, and absorbed woodworking skills from carpenters. Each new skill was a small victory, a tiny building block that would eventually transform his life in ways he couldn't imagine. But progress was painfully slow. It took him 3 full years to make that journey to Paris, 3 years of hunger, loneliness, and determination that would have broken most people. Little did he know, these survival skills and this unbreakable will would soon create a revolution that would change the world of luxury forever. Chapter 2. The Innovation That Changed Everything. When Louis finally reached Paris in 1837, he was 16 years old, illiterate, and had nothing but the clothes on his back. But he also had something invaluable, an unshakable work ethic and a collection of skills that most young men his age simply didn't possess. He managed to find work as an apprentice with a boxmaker and packer, a job that might sound simple but was actually quite prestigious. These craftsmen created custom luggage for wealthy clients and handled all the packing and unpacking whenever the upper class traveled. For the first time in his life, Louis was exposed to a world of elegance and sophistication that he'd never dreamed existed. He watched how the wealthy lived, studied their needs and desires, and absorbed every detail about what made quality craftsmanship truly exceptional. Louis threw himself into this work with an intensity that impressed everyone around him. He arrived early, stayed late, and constantly looked for ways to improve his techniques. His dedication didn't go unnoticed. In 1851, something extraordinary happened that would change the trajectory of his entire life. The Empress of France herself became a customer and was so impressed with Louis's meticulous craftsmanship that she appointed him as her personal boxmaker and packer. For any craftsman, this was the ultimate honor, the pinnacle of what anyone in his profession could hope to achieve. Louis had gone from a homeless teenager sleeping in forests to working directly for royalty in just 14 years. But Louis Vuitton wasn't satisfied with simply reaching the top of his profession. He had a bigger vision, and more importantly, he'd identified a fundamental problem that no one else seemed to notice. Every piece of luggage in the world was made from leather and featured a rounded, dome-shaped top designed to make rain roll off. While this kept clothes dry, it created a massive logistical nightmare. These rounded trunks couldn't be stacked, which meant porters had to carry them one by one, making travel incredibly inefficient and expensive. Louis began experimenting with different materials in his spare time, testing various combinations until he discovered that canvas was not only lighter and more durable than leather, but also more water-resistant. This breakthrough meant he could design trunks with completely flat tops that could be stacked efficiently, revolutionizing how people traveled. In 1854, when Louis was 33 and finally married, he used his life savings to open his own workshop in Paris. His timing was perfect. More and more people were beginning to travel by train and steamship, which meant the market for high-quality luggage was expanding rapidly. Louis's flat-topped canvas trunks were an immediate sensation. Within just 2 years, they had become the must-have accessory among the wealthy, a status symbol that separated the truly sophisticated from mere pretenders. Orders began pouring in from around the world, including requests from royalty as far away as Egypt. By 1859, Louis had earned enough profit to hire 20 craftsmen and open a larger workshop outside Paris. He had successfully transformed himself from a homeless orphan into one of the most successful entrepreneurs in France. Just when it seemed like nothing could stop his rise to the top, fate was about to test his resilience once again. Chapter 3. Destroyed and Reborn. In 1870, when Louis was 49 years old and at the height of his success, the Franco-Prussian War erupted across France. Louis was forced to flee his home and workshop, cramming into overcrowded shelters with thousands of other refugees. Food was scarce, disease was rampant, and every day brought new fears about whether they would survive to see the war's end. When Louis was finally able to return to his shop in 1871, his heart must have broken at what he found. Windows were smashed, equipment was stolen or destroyed, and years of careful work had been reduced to rubble. At nearly 50 years old, Louis Vuitton had lost everything he'd worked so hard to build. A lesser man might have given up, but Louis saw opportunity where others saw only destruction. With so many businesses destroyed and people displaced, there were prime commercial locations available throughout Paris that had never been accessible before. Louis used his remaining savings to secure a shop in the most aristocratic part of the city, right next to the railway station and the Grand Hotel. This location was perfect because travelers who needed new luggage could find Louis Vuitton products without going out of their way. By 1872, he had not only rebuilt his business but had created an entirely new design, luggage made from beige canvas with distinctive stripes. This new style became incredibly popular, and customers loved showing off the modern, elegant aesthetic. Even when competitors tried to copy his designs, the superior quality of authentic Louis Vuitton products kept customers loyal to the original. For the next 20 years, Louis continued to refine his craft and expand his reputation until his death in 1892 at the age of 70. But the story was far from over. His son Georges inherited not just a business, but a legacy of innovation and excellence. Georges had even grander ambitions than his father, immediately setting out to make Louis Vuitton a global brand. He opened a successful store in London and continued expanding into new markets around the world. As the brand grew more popular, counterfeiting became a serious problem. In 1896, Georges created the now iconic LV monogram, using his father's initials to make authentic products harder to copy. He also developed revolutionary new locks that made it nearly impossible for thieves to break into the trunks. By 1900, the company employed 100 people, each trained for months or even years before they were trusted to create products on their own. This commitment to craftsmanship remains unchanged today, with Louis Vuitton employees still training for 18 months to 2 years before they're allowed to work independently. The brand also began expanding beyond luggage when fashion icon Coco Chanel commissioned a small dome-shaped handbag in 1925. Initially created just for her personal use, this design was eventually mass-produced and named the Alma. Its success led to other iconic bags like the Keepall, Speedy, and Noe, helping to transform handbags from bulky necessities into fashionable accessories. But as the company continued to grow and prosper, Europe was heading toward its darkest chapter, and the Vuitton family would soon face choices that would haunt the brand for decades to come. Chapter 4. The Secret. They tried to hide. When Georges Vuitton died in 1936, control of the company passed to his son, Gaston Louis, marking the third generation of family leadership. But Gaston inherited the business at possibly the worst time in modern European history. Within just a few years, World War II had engulfed France, and Paris was under Nazi occupation. Contracts were cancelled overnight, the factory was forced to shut down, and the future of Louis Vuitton hung in the balance. Gaston faced an impossible choice: collaborate with the Nazi regime or watch his family's legacy disappear forever. What happened next is a chapter of Louis Vuitton's history that the company tried desperately to hide for decades. When author Stéphanie Bonvicini was researching her book Louis Vuitton, A French Saga, she asked to see company records from the World War II period. Company representatives immediately became evasive, claiming that all documents from 1930 to 1945 had been destroyed in a fire, but Bonvicini refused to give up. Through painstaking research of other historical documents, she uncovered the truth that Louis Vuitton had been trying to conceal. During the Nazi occupation, while many fashion brands were forced to shut down because they refused to cooperate with the occupying forces, Louis Vuitton remained open. The company was able to maintain a glamorous ground-floor shop in the Hôtel du Parc throughout the entire Nazi regime by collaborating with the enemy. This revelation was devastating for the brand's reputation, but it also highlighted the impossible moral complexity of wartime survival. Gaston Vuitton wasn't alone in making this choice. Coco Chanel and several other fashion designers also collaborated with the Nazis to protect their businesses and employees. These weren't decisions made lightly or out of greed, but desperate attempts to preserve livelihoods and legacies during humanity's darkest hour. Without these morally ambiguous choices, many of the luxury brands we know today might not exist. It's a reminder that even the most successful companies are built by flawed human beings facing impossible circumstances. When Gaston passed away in 1970, his son-in-law Henri Racamier took control of Louis Vuitton, becoming the fourth generation to lead the company. Unlike his predecessors, Henri brought extensive business experience from outside the family, and he had ambitious plans to transform Louis Vuitton from a respected family business into a global luxury empire. Henri changed the business model from wholesale to retail, expanded aggressively into international markets like Japan, and modernized every aspect of the operation. The results were spectacular. Accounting for inflation, sales exploded from $20 million to $260 million in just 6 years. In 1984, Henri took the company public, selling 1 million shares at $63.63 each. The offering sold out immediately, providing the capital needed for even more aggressive expansion. By 1987, Louis Vuitton had reached $1 billion in annual sales, far beyond anything the company's founder could have imagined when he first opened his small workshop in Paris. Henri also engineered a merger with Moet Hennessy, a luxury drinks company that produced champagne and cognac, creating the conglomerate LVMH. The idea was to pool resources and expertise to dominate the entire luxury market. Unfortunately, Henri didn't get along with the leadership of Moet Hennessy, so he brought in a successful property developer named Bernard Arnault to help manage the situation. This decision would prove to be the biggest mistake of Henri's career, ultimately costing the Vuitton family control of their ancestral business forever. Chapter 5. The Empire That Dominates Today. Bernard Arnault was everything Henri Racamier wasn't: ruthless, calculating, and absolutely brilliant at corporate warfare. While Henry saw him as a helpful ally, Bernard was secretly orchestrating a hostile takeover that would make him one of the wealthiest men in history. Bernard quietly acquired 43% of Louis Vuitton's shares and convinced the Moet and Hennessy families to support his bid for control of LVMH. When Henry realized what was happening, he felt completely betrayed by the man he'd brought in to help him. He took Bernard to court, demanding that the takeover be reversed, but the legal system sided with Bernard. Henry was so disgusted by being outmaneuvered that he quit the company entirely, ending nearly 100 years of Vuitton family involvement in the brand their ancestor had created. Initially, Bernard's hostile takeover seemed like a disaster for Louis Vuitton. Sales began to crash, journalists stopped covering the brand, and many industry experts predicted that the company might fail completely. But Bernard Arnault hadn't become a billionaire by accident. He understood exactly how to revitalize a struggling luxury brand. For Louis Vuitton's 100th anniversary, he orchestrated collaborations with high-profile fashion designers like Vivienne Westwood and Isaac Mizrahi, each creating their own unique interpretation of the iconic LV monogram. These collaborations generated products that customers had never seen before and created massive buzz that brought Louis Vuitton back into the spotlight. Bernard's investment strategy paid off beyond anyone's wildest expectations. He is now the CEO of LVMH and, depending on stock market fluctuations, frequently ranks as one of the 5 wealthiest people in the world with a net worth exceeding $180 billion. Unlike other billionaires like Bezos, Musk, or Gates, Bernard prefers to stay out of the public spotlight, earning him the nickname the Wolf in Cashmere for his ruthless business tactics combined with refined public image. Under his leadership, LVMH has acquired over 70 different luxury brands through a series of strategic mergers and acquisitions, creating an empire that dominates virtually every segment of the high-end market. In the modern era, Louis Vuitton has continued to evolve and expand its appeal to younger demographics. In 1997, Marc Jacobs became creative director and launched the first ready-to-wear clothing line, expanding the brand far beyond its luggage roots. He also created the popular monogram Vernus line of handbags and moved the company into watches, jewelry, and sunglasses before eventually leaving to start his own fashion line. The company has embraced collaborations with contemporary brands like Supreme, which initially seemed like an odd pairing until people realized how profitable it could be. Ironically, Louis Vuitton had actually sued Supreme for copying their logo before realizing that a partnership would be far more lucrative than a lawsuit. Today, Louis Vuitton Supreme items resell for astronomical prices, with leather trunks selling for $125,000 and simple hoodies commanding over $5,000. Despite being in business for over 160 years, Louis Vuitton continues to face the same counterfeiting problems that plagued the company since its early days. They estimate that hundreds of millions of dollars in sales are lost annually to fake products, and they maintain an entire team of lawyers whose sole job is hunting down copyright infringers around the world. They've even sued Google for allowing search results and advertisements that lead people to counterfeit products, though Google won that case by arguing they can't control what users post on the internet. Today, Louis Vuitton remains the #1 fashion brand in the entire world, valued at $39 billion with more than 400 stores in nearly every major city on the planet. The brand continues to be a status symbol that many people aspire to own and a staple among celebrities and the ultra-wealthy. From a homeless 13-year-old boy sleeping in French forests to a global empire worth tens of billions of dollars, the Louis Vuitton story proves that with enough determination, innovation, and perhaps a little bit of luck, it's possible to overcome any obstacle and build something truly extraordinary. What do you think about Louis Vuitton? Do you believe the quality justifies the massive price tags? Or is it all just hype and marketing? If this story inspired you, tap like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss the next unbelievable story.